I am disappointed in Eddington. Did I think it was a good film? Yes. Did I think it was up to par with Ari Aster's other work? No. So let's talk about why. Every other Ari Aster film is filled with satirical and horrifically relevant commentary on relationships, society, and other interesting contemporary topics. Eddington is like the extreme version of that, jammed with topics of racism, rioting, COVID policies, conspiracy theories, and big corporations trying to take control of people. However, these themes are usually streamlined. It's pretty clear what the themes and social commentary are throughout, and the films usually stick with those points and observations. I felt Eddington failed to do this and tried to do too much in one film. Although I felt the same way about Beau is Afraid, it felt more fitting in that film, as the protagonist suffers with all sorts of mental illnesses and is still kept, mostly giant penis monster aside, within those points. Throughout the film, we have discussions of COVID policies, with the film's central protagonist, Sheriff Joe Cross, being more on the politically right side, wearing his emotions on his sleeves. While Pedro Pascal's Ted Garcia, the city's mayor, pretends that he cares about the policies he constantly says are important, but breaks them. For a lot of the first and second act of the film seemed to be an exploration of all those themes and somewhat current affairs, offering a dramatic Ari Aster climax that ties it all together, hitting us with a harsh truth in the final few minutes of the film. However, this film takes a completely different turn. Quickly, Sheriff Joe Cross is being hunted down by an unknown militia, who are hinted at being Antifa. The film turns into an action film, which I had no problem with and actually really enjoyed, but ultimately ends in Joe killing a few of them and becoming paralyzed as a result of fighting one of them. A lost soul, unsure of who he is and following left-wing ideologies for recognition and wanting to be a part of a cause, Brian shoots the man that paralyzed Joe and becomes a right-wing podcast bro. Then it's revealed that the data center that was to be built in the city that Joe and his mother-in-law were skeptical and wary of are paying his and her bills, taking care of the paralyzed Joe. As you can probably tell, I thought this was a bit too off the beaten path, so to speak. Not only is it unclear whether it's Antifa that paralyzed and went after Joe, which kind of muddies the water for the commentary about companies ultimately having power over people as opposed to political ideologies in the government. There's just no setup for it. Never is it clear that there will be a threat Joe has to deal with, or something other than a small subplot or world building. They simply show up, get the job done, and that's it. Same goes for the data center and the company that runs it. There's a logo on the plane of a hand holding the world, as if to signify that some sort of higher power like the government or some kind of giant conglomerate company that owns substantial assets and can do what they want to people while not having any consequences is a part of this, and may actually be the ones sending in the militia. After doing some research, I actually came upon another theory too, which is that this is the International Credit Union behind this. If you look up what a hand on a globe symbol signifies, the International Credit Union comes up. They own tens of thousands of credit unions and operate in more than 100 countries, so maybe they are responsible for this, as they could have some kind of investment in the Solid Gold Magikarp company and want Joe gone as he opposes it. In the world of the film, though, of course, this didn't actually happen. It could also signify people who own the banks and have, trillions of dollars too. It may not be like a direct reference to them, which I'm honestly unsure if it is. Given the symbol isn't exactly the same and the hand is holding the earth as if to cover it and pick it up, as opposed to the International Credit Union symbol sort of cupping the world, what is certain though is that Solid Gold Magikarp is never hinted at having any ties to any sort of militia, particularly Antifa. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Also, the scene right after Joe announces that he believes Antifa is behind the murders, we see the plane. So it could simply just be Antifa doing it as a response to those allegations. And since they hate law enforcement, it's easy for them to justify the attack on Joe. But then where does that symbol on the plane come from? Why is that there? Therefore, all of these sporadic ideas and all of these things contribute to a lack of what I believe is called thematic unity, a narrative method where most of, if not all, the characters, their motivations, the plot, and the actions of the characters are all centered around the main themes of the film. That being said, I wanted to talk about a few other analyses I had, or theories, I suppose you could call it. I believe the homeless man represents either the ultimate anarchist, the political middle, or how far we can go when we become obsessed and fixated on conspiracy theories. Not that conspiracy theories are inherently bad or wrong, apart from the obvious ones that are harmful to certain groups of people or offer nonsensical ideas that can harm our fact-checking logic, so to speak, but it can corrupt you if you become obsessed with them, can't trust anyone or anything. He could also represent hate, or, the hateful essence that can be on both sides of the political spectrum, as he's always, yelling and screaming, and it seems like he's always verbally attacking someone. Also, just before he's killed by Joe, he speaks of literally killing people with poison. Joe killing him too could also represent him killing his own political hate, or perhaps even replacing the homeless man as the representation of hate and violence along the political spectrum, as he ends up on a bit of a killing spree right after. I have another analysis, or theory of an analysis as well, which is that Joe falling on and crushing the Native American man's skeleton could signify how he's the kind of person that in history would have, oppressed the Native Americans and would have potentially colonized them, stealing their land and stomping all over their history, literally. It could also be a comment on how COVID is the kind of political thing that distracts people from the real issues like racism and things like that. Not that it isn't a real issue, but in this instance, most of the time, no one even has it in the town. Having said this, I really enjoyed the film. Ari Aster did an absolutely amazing job directing and, for the most part, writing the film. I also loved how different the setting was to his other film, as I thought it brought a totally different vibe and atmosphere that was definitely welcome. It felt very fresh, new, and unique. The score, editing, acting, and everything else was also amazing, as, is expected and always is with Ari Aster's work. Okay guys, so that's my Neon Hunter episode on Eddington. I really enjoyed making this video. So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed. Let's just stop for a moment, because this is how I felt before rewatching the film and writing this video. When I did those things, I finally unlocked the truth at the heart of this film, and I realized it actually is incredibly thematically focused. Now, how is it thematically focused? What is the theme that pulls all of this together? The theme is that the film is about how people use politics as an instrument to get what they want. Think about it. Brian uses it to get with Sarah, even though at the end of the film, he is on the opposite side of the political spectrum, which proves he was either just using it or didn't fully feel that it was what represented his beliefs. Solid Gold Magikarp uses Antifa as a scapegoat to try to murder Joe Cross, the man that made it so difficult for them to build the data center there, and would later make it impossible, probably, as mayor. Joe Cross uses it to accuse Sarah of murdering Ted and Eric Garcia. Sarah uses it to try to feel like she's a good person and to abolish the guilt she feels about being white. Eric uses it to get with Sarah, even though he doesn't give a shit, and taunts Brian, who believes in those political messages at that moment, whereas Eric doesn't. I also believe it is about how these kinds of people ultimately get punished. Ted and Eric both used it to get their own personal gains, money from Solid Gold Magikarp for Ted, and a relationship with Sarah for Eric. Therefore, they're punished, although it's with swift death. Joe was not afforded the same fate though, as he used it in the worst way possible, to frame someone for murder, and then uses COVID as a political device to put political sides against each other, which ironically, in the sense of poetic justice, COVID is the very thing that made it easier for the Solid Gold Magikarp soldiers, or whoever they are, to kill him. Back to him framing someone for murder, using political ideologies to shield himself from being accused. He didn't just do that, he framed a young girl. She would have gone to prison for perhaps the rest of her life, which is an evil act, obviously, just for Joe to murder two people for no real reason, apart from perhaps feeling like he needs to get vengeance for his wife, but also to just feel better within himself after all the tension and all the bullshit that's gone on between him and Ted. So, he gets possibly the worst kind of punishment. He's paralyzed and brain dead and has to watch as the ultimate masters of using politics to get what they want and get away with it paralyze him, the corporate entities. He was beaten at his own game. And at the end of the day, you're going to be taken care of by people that mistreat you and the very ones that put you in the state to begin with. Because ultimately, as is apparent with Louise's mother too, we all end up working for them and doing as they say anyway. However, you might be asking, why did Michael and Officer Butterfly get punished? I mean, if this is the case, why are they getting punished? They didn't do anything wrong. In fact, they're one of the only morally good characters in the entire film. My only thesis and combatants to that is that because they did nothing wrong and they were unfazed during these racist attacks and didn't do anything to riot against these things, that they're still punished as a result. And also, Vernon Peake, why didn't he get punished? Well, once again, it's about if people are using politics to manipulate others, especially when they don't believe in those political ideologies. I think that's the key thing there, and getting something personally from others instead of actually believing in it. However, I don't actually think Vernon is using politics, quote unquote, quite as much as the other characters to get what he wants. Obviously, the kind of things that he's talking about fall under the umbrella of politics, but it's not specifically about that. It's more about control. It's about trying to recover after trauma, that kind of thing. Although, you know, it probably is more deep and more manipulative than that. He seems to, genuinely believe these things. He seems to actually feel this way, which is the key thing here. He actually believes these things, as opposed to the others which didn't, or just sat around and did nothing. So yeah, it's been quite a ride with this film. However, I do still want to talk about some other things that I really liked about it. Something that also stuck out to me was the Foley. This is something that is more difficult to notice when you're, watching in the cinema, which I did the first time. But upon digital release, it's a lot more clear. The precise, crisp Foley adds another layer of realism and character to the film, which makes the more grandiose moments personal and vice versa. It also elevates the quiet introspective scenes to another level. The transitions and use of sound design, cinematography, and editing for each are also incredibly unique, even against any of Ari Aster's other work. For example, the blackness engulfing the screen when dolling towards a militia member's mask, transforming it into a zoom out from the black BLM square on Instagram that was amazing. And the spray paint used as a replacement for the sound of the car driving past us was absolutely incredible and really, really creative. It's clear that Ari Aster can make even the most boring scenes interesting. I mean, that's obvious throughout his entire filmography, not only with his satirical commentary with his characters, his incredible use of tension, but also with small things like these transitions. The film also did something that many films fail to do. Almost all of them, in fact. It was politically subjective. It never felt like it was trying to shove a political message down your throat, like a certain opinion, and felt more like a holistic look at how ridiculous everyone is on both sides of the political spectrum. That is something that rarely is captured, and few have the wisdom and insight to achieve in their work. And it's a needed perspective and experience for everyone, as it gives us a look into both worlds. Okay guys, so that's my Neon Hunter episode on Eddington. I really enjoyed making this video. I really enjoyed that kind of mirrored first half of realizing when making the video, like, there's actually a lot more to this and kind of unlocking the meaning. So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed. The Batman analysis will be coming out soon. I'm probably going to do my first inspiration segment for that series. So yeah, look forward to that. And also I'm on TikTok, Instagram, everything. So go and follow me over there. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you guys for all the support. I've had some amazing comments, some really good discussions. So I really appreciate people being respectful and just being able to engage in a discussion. That has been really, really fruitful, just amazing. So thank you guys so much for that. So yeah, take care guys. I'll see you soon and have fun out there neon hunting.